So I figured I would start with a little video that hopefully explains a little bit why Ken and Nora invited me and Brady invited me to come today. So this hopefully is somewhat self-explanatory.
What will it take to change this planet we all share? Too much, right? Well, is 1% too much? 1% of the...
There's that internet connection. This is why I usually travel with a systems engineer who does all the technology for me.
8-hour workday is about 5 minutes. But over a year, that's 20 hours. What if we only gave 1%? What would that look like? What if everyone at your company spent 1% of their work time volunteering for a cause they really cared about? What if your company gave 1% of your product to those in need? What if every company gave 1% of their equity to a place that could make a big difference? Could we all solve society's biggest challenges together? Not only could we, it's working now. That's the model at Salesforce. Salesforce donates 1% of their time, product, and financial resources to organizations doing good in the world. It's called the 1% model, and if only 1% of you watching this today does this at your company, you will help make a significant difference. When you count it up, it's actually a lot.
So, my company, Salesforce, we love videos, and we have a team in-house that produces all kinds of videos that talk about what we're selling and what we're doing and all kinds of interesting things like that. One thing I would ask is, who here is familiar at all with the company Salesforce, other than the folks I met last night? They probably have heard more of this than they care to. So I'm not here to sell you or convince you that Salesforce is the greatest thing or that you should adopt Salesforce in everything you do. But the reason Ken and Nora asked me to come and speak is because I think as a company, we are on the front end of an emerging trend that I think is very important for all people that are in business. And as I understand, most of you, I think most of this group, owners of audiology practitioners and owners of small businesses and things. So we're a big believer that there's a shift that's taking place in the United States today, where for years and years and years, especially in big business, the focus was on, hey, the only person that matters is the shareholder. Everything's about shareholder optimization. And I'm sure that if you own small businesses, there's a lot of you who say, hey, don't minimize the importance of shareholder optimization in any kind of business. But what we've come to the conclusion on, and it's really paid some pretty significant dividends for us, is that a lot of the mission certainly is around being a for-profit operation, but there's an opportunity to give back as well. And that giving back, I think the phrase that Ken and Nora have shared with me, and I think it's taken from Benjamin Franklin, is doing well while doing good. And I think that's certainly something as a company that we prescribe to. And so what I want to share with you today, and certainly can talk about anything you'd like. If you have any questions about cloud computing and Salesforce, we can certainly talk about that as well. But talk a little bit about our experience in really having a very active corporate philanthropy, what that means to us, and why that's more than just the feel-good piece of giving back. Because I think that while it's really great when you can help in a meaningful way people who are less fortunate than probably most of us, if not all of us, it also has dividends in the business. And it's something certainly that we're seeing having a significant impact on what we do. So what I want to do, for those of you who are not familiar with Salesforce, I should probably make sure I'm not standing in front of that. How many of you are familiar with what's called cloud computing? If anyone has Apple devices and stuff. So Salesforce was a company founded in 1999, and the vision that our founder Mark Benioff had was that enterprise software, or software that companies use, should be as easy to use as using Amazon.com. Because if any of you have worked in larger businesses, or if any of you operate your own kind of IT infrastructure for billing and patient records and those things, you know that has traditionally been pretty heavy lifting. You know, you've had to hire IT people, and especially when you get into large businesses, you know, there are a lot of companies that spend, if not tens and hundreds of millions, in some cases billions of dollars, supporting IT infrastructure. And Mark's vision was that there had to be a better way at that, to do that. And so that's why he started the company. But he started with, I think, a vision for not just that. And it's really paid off for us. So interesting, we are probably as fortunate as any company in the world for the positive press we get. So we're a member of the Fortune 500. We've been named to Fortune's list of most admired companies in the world for 3 years in a row now, which we're very proud of. We've been named a Fortune 100 Best Place to Work every year since 2008. And Forbes magazine named us the most innovative company in the world, 2011, 12, and 13. Unfortunately, in 2014, we were number 2 to a company you may have heard of called Tesla, who makes electric cars. It's interesting, Tesla is a customer of ours. That was an interesting announcement because most companies would be really thrilled to be on the list. And we're like, what do you mean Tesla beat us? They make cars, for heaven's sake. And we're going to be, we've got about, this says 16,000 employees. We're going to have 20,000 employees probably within the next 12 months. And we're on pace to do $7 billion a year in revenue next year, $10 billion within a couple years. Which I think is a really good story. And by 2016, we'll be the 4th largest software company in the world. I don't tell you that because I expect you to run out and say, well, Salesforce is great. We should buy stock. Maybe we should buy your products. I think we believe one of the things that is our secret sauce and contributes to our success is actually our different approach to business. And we see customers really, really respond to this. Before I get into that, I talked a little bit, if you've heard of the kind of the genesis of the company was this new technology model. Things needed to be easier to use. Companies needed to focus much more on their customers. That was some of the innovation that really came about. New business models. We believe that in our space, the way people paid for technology had to change, that there was too much lock-in. I mean, anyone here worked for a big company in the past? So probably a few people. You see what's involved in running a very large organizations, very long contracts, very rigid systems, a lot of difficulty. And that was the model that had to change. But the other thing that I think is probably, if you ask Mark Benioff, who's our founder, the thing he's most proud of is that he believed that philanthropy had to be integrated into the business from the beginning. And so when Mark started the company, he came up with what at the time was called the 1-1-1 model. And it was his commitment on day one of starting the business that 1% of the employees' time would be committed to not-for-profit and charitable causes, 1% of the starting equity in the business would be put into a 501c3 charity, and 1%, it's varied between 1% of product or 1% of revenue, but 1% of our product would also be given back to not-for-profits or NGO organizations. So Mark will tell you, this was really, really easy to do on day one, because when we started the company, we only had 6 employees, the equity wasn't worth anything, and the product was pretty immature. So it was an easy commitment to make. But the genesis of why he did this was that he previously worked for a company called Oracle. So does anyone know Oracle? So Oracle, and Oracle's founders, Larry Ellison, and Mark and Larry are actually friends. But Oracle probably is not a company that has a reputation for its kinder, gentler, save the world mentality. Mark, as a young senior vice president at Oracle, he kind of had this life-affirming event where he took 6 months off and he went to Tibet and he went to India and he met the Dalai Lama, and he's a really interesting guy if you ever read anything about him. A little controversial at times too, which makes my job interesting. But he came back to Oracle and he said, you know what, we need to interject this idea that we can do more in the world into what we do. And what he figured out was it was really hard and it wasn't taking hold because it wasn't part of the DNA or the culture of the company. The company didn't grow up as that. And that's where he figured out this had to be something that you started with very, very early on. So that's what he did. And as you can see here, it has resulted in some pretty amazing things. So this says 920,000 hours. about a month ago, we actually crossed the 1 million hours of employee giving time back, which was really, really exciting. It is so embedded in our DNA and our culture. I was in a, so I should say, I am the area vice president for Salesforce here in the central US. So I run our large enterprise business based here in Chicago. We had our North American senior leadership meeting. So these are people who presumably are pretty busy, and we did a 2-day meeting. One day of the meeting was getting yelled at about how the quarter looked and how next quarter looked. The second day of the meeting was we all went and volunteered at the New York Food Depository for a day. And it was interesting. My boss, a guy by the name of Tony Owens, who runs North America for Salesforce, when he was saying this, he says, hey, listen, we got this big group. We've arranged to do this, what we call foundation event tomorrow. And he said, I'd like a show of hands of who's planning on going. And I would say 2/3 of the hands went up. And he said, that's great. So for the 1/3 of you that are more important than me and have more to do than to go help people who are less fortunate, I just want to make sure I got exactly who that is. And we had 100% participation the next day, which was really, really, really cool. And I'll tell you, even things like this, if you've ever dealt with salespeople, when we do our sales award trip, so people make 100%, we go to Hawaii every year, and one of the requirements of our foundation event is that you volunteer a half day of your week in Hawaii towards a cause. So I got to build houses for Habitat Humanity on Maui for a day when we were in Hawaii a few months ago. Those all sound like fun things, but they're also part of building this culture of giving back. And it's a fantastic community building exercise within our organization. So what we've also done is, I think there's two trends in philanthropy that I think are very interesting. One is the view that philanthropy has to be more than just what I call checkbook philanthropy, meaning that as business leaders, as people who own businesses, as people who have an expertise, the ability to apply your expertise, your skills, your products, what you do to solve world problems is real and tangible. And if you look at it, some of the best work that's being done on anything is being done in the for-profit space. And if we can apply some of those same motivations and some of those same expertise to some problems that might help our world just a little bit, it can make a big difference. And that's what that video was about. The other thing that we believe, I'll take a step back. The other thing I think is interesting about an emergence in large-scale philanthropy is the idea that we should have the same expectations for outcomes that we do in the for-profit world. So it's interesting. I think the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has probably taken the biggest lead on this. And it's a little controversial because there have certainly been causes where they've yanked funding because they expect people to come and say, listen, we want to go tackle this problem. And for that, we're looking for this kind of commitment. And here's the results we're going to get. For years and years and years, a lot of charities did not hold themselves accountable for the results. And so I think the emergence of corporate contributions and some very influential people like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation towards making sure that we're actually driving towards outcomes and not just the feel-good aspect of philanthropy is really, really important. The other thing that we've done is to say that when you integrate philanthropy into a business, it should be self-sustaining. And so what we've done, in addition to our foundation that was created at the start of the business, we've actually started an associated business called the Salesforce.org vision, and this is what that is. This is the arm in which we're going to use, in addition to the contributions of our employees' time and the equity investment that was made, we actually have a group that generates profits that fund the foundation so that the foundation's work is ongoing. And the vision for that is that by 2020, we're going to have 100,000 customers that are customers of our not-for-profit part of our business. The foundation, or Salesforce.org, will be doing $500 million in revenue, and we will regularly be giving $100 million a year in direct grants. So meaningful, meaningful, meaningful contribution, which would also make us the largest corporate philanthropy in the world, which is a pretty cool story. So this is what we do. And again, this is not a big commercial for us. Hopefully this will generate some maybe thoughts on how this can be applied to the co-op, to your individual businesses and what you do. And at the end of this, I'll tell you a little bit more about why this is important to us. But we've got the two related organizations between the foundation and Salesforce.org. We focus on not-for-profits in higher education. We focus on doing our good work in 7 different countries. The technology piece is really important because if you look at, we believe that on the for-profit side of our business, we've actually helped for-profit businesses really make a difference in how they relate to customers. If you think about the mission of many charities, whether customers are donors or customers are the people you're actually helping, the complexity of managing that can be made a lot easier with technology. And so our ability to apply what we do in the for-profit space towards optimizing what happens in the not-for-profit space is really important. And I'm going to show you a video at the end of, if we have time, maybe 1 or 2 videos of some of the organizations that we've helped, because it's a really, really neat story. And it also talks a little bit about some of the challenges that exist for the not-for-profit space and some of the charities that are out there. Six Clouds talks about what we do, and then the 111 mission as well. So that's kind of what we do in the foundation. So the power of 1% of product. Again, I talked a little bit about the fact that organizations, they need this kind of help. And it's amazing when you go talk to even some of the biggest organizations in the world, the Girl Scouts of America, the Boy Scouts of America, religious organizations, a lot of educational organizations now are really, really struggling because people are giving less. We've just come out of, in some places maybe not so much come out of, a very difficult economic time. People are not giving as much as they used to. And so the ability to leverage technology to get more out of the investments that you are making, I'm probably messing up the video by walking around, sorry, is something that we think is really, really important. And it's probably the place more so than the money, and maybe even more so than the contribution of time. The ability to apply what we do and the technology that we have to solving these problems, I think, has had the biggest impact on what these organizations do. In fact, there are certain organizations like the Girl Scouts and certain healthcare initiatives where the people who run those organizations say they could not do what they do without changing the way they do outreach. And it's amazing, as the father of 2 young daughters, I had no idea how much trouble the Girl Scouts was in. As an organization, you go back 4 or 5 years, really, really in trouble. They had to completely change how they relate to their alumni, how they relate to the next generation of girls coming up. And actually, one of the things, I don't think it's in the slide deck, what we've taken on as a company is really the commitment to the fact that we need to do more to be fostering girls' interest in technology and in science careers. Because if you look at our company, it is we go to too many meetings, and those meetings don't represent the rest of society. And I think we're pretty good at this. And so our CEO's actually made a commitment that he will not do a meeting unless there is an equal number of men and women in the room. It's an amazing thing. And it's really cool because I have a couple women who work for me who've said, yeah, I got this crazy invitation to a meeting with Mark. What's that about? And it's Mark's commitment to saying, I'm going to force exposure to some of the these up-and-coming women that we have in our organization. That starts when they're this little. And again, technology and the Girl Scouts, it's a great example of what we've done there. Higher education is another space. Education is changing. I think there are a lot of people who believe that education is the ticket out of poverty, out of all kinds of issues, and that's not just a situation here in the United States, it's a situation around the world. And so to the extent that we can do more with education, I think it's all good stuff. Equity, we make direct grants to a lot of different things, a lot of different organizations. It is a really, really neat thing. The other thing, we match every employee charitable contribution up to $5,000 as long as it's to a 501c3 organization. It's really neat. It's amazing in so many companies that have a match and the employees don't take advantage of it. But these are things that I think are really, really important. And again, I want to come back to, I think doing things like this in your businesses can help you retain employees and have more engaged employees, and I'll talk about that in a second as well. We also, and it's interesting, this one I think is also very, very cool. We give every employee, 20,000 employees, 6 days off paid to volunteer. Anything they want to do, 501c3, right? This is where I think it's really neat, and I'll talk a little bit about what we get out of this beyond the feel-good part of this, in our world, especially in technology kind of globally, but certainly in San Francisco and Silicon Valley, the competition for talent is fierce. And the wage appreciation, the amount people will pay for talent is really, really competitive. What we've come to the conclusion on is that by being the conduit for folks to get involved in their community, and by creating this community of people who say, hey, in our company, if you're interested in women's health issues, if you're interested in education, if you're interested in the environment, if you're interested in housing, or you name the issue, there is a group within Salesforce that you can join to apply your 6 days of free time. There's a really cool organization called Surf for Life that's in the San Francisco Bay Area. And what they do is they do trips down to, I think it's Honduras and a few other places where there's great surfing. And you go work on a major infrastructure project, whether it be housing or plumbing systems or water systems or crop and food systems. You go work on this thing, and they drag a surfing instructor down, and they teach you how to surf. It's like a 2-year waiting list to go on those trips. And it's really cool. Now, think about this. If you had always wanted to learn how to surf, and you once a year, you get to go to Honduras, or you get to go to one of these hot spots in the world and go surfing, and this is your way to do it, and you're feeling good because you're making a difference while doing it, and Google calls up and says, I'm going to pay you an extra $5 grand, 10 grand. I mean, some of our folks, it's probably even more than that. It makes you think twice, because you say, but that means I can't go surfing anymore because I lose my community. And so what we found, and I'm not even sure, I think this is kind of the unintended consequence, by creating these communities of people that do good together, they feel more of an attachment to Salesforce, and they're less likely to leave, and they're more fired up about work because it's not just a job anymore, right? And so I think one of the things that I talked to Nora and Ken about, and Brady, is that I think for small businesses, there's something to this, because I would imagine in all of your businesses, the cost to train a new employee is huge. And the cost, it's probably also tough to keep ratcheting up pay. So if you can spend a little time to give back to your community, if you can spend a little time to do some good work, and at the same time make your employees feel like they're a bigger part of what they're doing, the likelihood of them being more committed to you and your businesses and to the job, I think, is that much more. And I'd love to say we did all this because, it's just the right thing to do and all this kind of stuff. I really believe a big part of it is creating that community within our businesses where people want to work there and they feel good about working where they work. We also find that the next generation, so somebody in here told me I wasn't young last night. I'm trying to think who that was. Yes. Jane said it was your, I'm trying to, new audiologist whose husband works at Salesforce. I said, oh, really? What's his name? And she said, well, he's really young. You probably wouldn't know him. So I thought, wow. I'm not sure when that happened, but I swear to God, it wasn't long ago. But anyway, the millennial generation coming up with this, one of the things we keep hearing about is that millennials don't have the same motivations that maybe a lot of us do. That the millennials are more likely to look at their working career as being project-based. I'm going to go do this for a little while, and then I'm going to go do this. Or that their working life has to fit more within kind of a greater life plan. It's not just about work in the way, I probably look at it or have looked at it. And so I think as we look at how we bring that generation of folks into our businesses, the ability to understand that the things that motivate that generation are going to be different. And so this is just a whole bunch of goodness, right? You can give back. You can, in a lot of cases, listen, we get more positive press for the charitable stuff we do than anything else. So if we were talking last night, so there's a conference in San Francisco every year called Dreamforce. Has anyone ever heard of it? It's a couple people. So Dreamforce is Salesforce's annual customer convention. Last week, we had 170,000 people in San Francisco for Dreamforce. And if you don't believe me, you can look it up. We shut down most of the city. We had 75,000 people show up for our concert. We had the Foo Fighters, the Killers, and Gary Clark Jr. It's really cool, except for the fact we were only planning for 50,000, which made it a little bit of a mess. But the reason people come to this event, the reason that people are so enthused about this stuff is not because we had the Foo Fighters play. And it's not because we're this corporate cloud computing company. People think we're cool. And I think it's in large part because of what we do around the foundation. I really, really do. 2 years ago, we had the Prime Minister of Haiti show up to thank us for our initiatives to help the recovery efforts down in Haiti. And it was really wild. While he's talking, the guy sitting next to me he goes, "Is that Sean Penn standing next to him?" And it was. So it was really cool. I've got some stories about that too, because Sean got in a fight with a photographer right after the speech, which was kind of, I kid you not. I kid you not. So anyway, our goal, massive impact and reach. Again, I gave you these numbers. It's interesting. I pulled this slide off of our foundation kind of page where we can go get this stuff. I'm like, why are all these pictures of the Pope there? Well, as you all know, the Pope made a speech to Congress today. And in the front row, as Nancy Pelosi's guest, was my friend Mark Benioff. And he actually is meeting with the Pope today to talk about some of the initiatives that he's driving in San Francisco, actually, which is kind of cool. The Pope has been very critical of kind of capitalism and for-profit, and maybe that's not the greatest thing in the world. I think he views some of the stuff that we're doing as maybe something that could be followed by a lot of corporations around the world to maybe change this a little bit. And we were talking last night, in San Francisco, the technology community has largely gotten a bad name in San Francisco because we've managed to drive up the price of real estate. We've made everything really, really expensive. And there's a sense that, as a whole, the industry has not been very respectful for people who aren't participating in the industry. And I think we're taking a lead role in trying to change that. So the other thing I'd say, this is a list of companies. Some of these you may be familiar with, companies like Google. The rest of them, if you're not in my world, you probably wouldn't know a lot of these, but these are some of the kind of the high-flying technology companies that are out there. They've adopted this as well, which I think is a really good sign. It's interesting. Last week at Dreamforce, Mark did a fireside chat kind of meeting with the CEO and founder of Uber. So is everyone familiar with Uber? And it was really cool to see him give the CEO of Uber a really hard time about the fact that they haven't adopted this in front of about 40,000 people. So that was really, really neat. But that is the end of what I formally prepared. What I thought I'd do, I've got some videos of some of the stories that I think are kind of neat. But before I show any of those, I thought I'd just open it up to the group. Do you have any questions about our experience in this, what it's meant for us? I mean, I'll tell you, I was in a meeting earlier this week with one of the senior leaders at Kellogg's in Battle Creek. It was an hour-long meeting, and we spent 10 minutes talking about community engagement and how important it was for Kellogg's to do business with companies that were giving back to the community. I had a meeting with the top 2 executives of Northern Trust Bank, which is one of the largest banks here in Chicago. And I swear 15 minutes of it was talking about the importance of working with companies and organizations that had a similar mindset towards supporting the communities in which they do business. So this is real. And I think especially in your businesses, where your practices, where you're working with consumers, people want to do business with folks who are involved. And especially for a lot of you who are in maybe a little smaller communities than Chicago, I heard in the talk earlier that we're not going to be in the big box retailers. I mean, I got to believe that's the Costco effect, right? That's the thing I'm sure a lot of you are worried about. Is that going to be the thing that hurts my business? I'm a big believer that if you're viewed as a responsible member of the community, if you're giving back, if you're involved, man, you can justify a little more money than the big box guys. And I think that's the opportunity for all of us in business. So, any questions, comments, disagreements?
Did you have a few slides back you showed a .org and a foundation?
Yep.
Is that 2 separate?
Yes.
not-for-profit tax-exempt organizations.
Yes, so what we've done is the Salesforce.org entity is the business end of the foundation's work. So what we do is we provide our technology at either no cost or significantly reduced cost for charities and NGOs. And the way we do that is through Salesforce.org. So if you're a 501c3, you can have 5 licenses of our technology at no charge at all. We don't charge you anything, and you can a lot of companies and a lot of not-for-profits actually run a lot of their outreach on our customer relationship management and service management solutions on that. We've now, as we've scaled this up, because we want this to be self-sustaining, Salesforce.org has a sales team, has a support team, has technical folks, but everything they sell is into the not-for-profit space at, when you get above 5 licenses at significant discounts. And the revenue that's generated from that and the profits that's generated that is 100% piled back into the foundation for some of the charitable giving. So the vision is that the not-for-profit business that we have should be fully self-sustaining of the foundation, and therefore it's not just checkbook philanthropy. We actually have a business that supports charity. Yeah.
Thank you very much for speaking to us about the amazing work that
You're welcome.
Salesforce is doing. I think that you guys are a real bright spot in the for-profit world.
Thank you.
My question is about your comments about millennials.
Mm-hmm.
So that meant a lot to me personally, being a millennial. I also have a lot of millennials work in my practice.
Enjoy it. It's soon. Someone's going to tell you you're not 26 anymore. I was the youngest guy in so many meetings until like last Thursday, and then
We also have a lot of millennials working in our practice.
Yeah.
Have you found that the 1-1-1 model is really resonating with millennials in particular? Are they utilizing their volunteer hours as much as the other generations? Is this
Yes.
Is this working for them?
Now, to be fair, we see it more in places where there are collections of millennials. So, I've got 750 people here in Chicago. I've got, probably a similar number in Portland, and then we've got 10,000 in the Bay Area probably, and then rest scattered. So where we have large concentrations, it does become kind of a community thing where a bunch of people get together and say, hey, this Friday afternoon we're going to go do this or whatever. But the uptake on just using the time to go do this is probably much more, even in the younger kind of millennial generation than we see anywhere else. I think, because when you're younger, you're maybe a little more idealistic and you want to save the world a little bit. But I do think that there's a big community element to that. And there's a generational shift that's taken place where that's more important. But I don't think it's enough just to say, I'm going to give you this time. I think targeting that in some ways. I mean, what I would think if you're, how many people do you have in one location, or how many in a city maybe in an office? How many?
Be up to 8 or 10.
So I think it would be really cool to get that group together and say, hey, we're going to go do this, and we're going to once a month or once a quarter or whatever it is, as an office, we're going to go volunteer somewhere. And we're going to shut the office down. I'm going to pay you, and we're going to go do something that's important. What are the causes that are important to you? What do you guys think would be neat? And maybe we'll do Eric's this month, and next quarter we'll pick somebody else's. But again, I think that goes back to people are going to think a lot of you as a business owner, and it builds that community, and you're giving back. I mean, like I said, especially in smaller communities, the good press I think you'd get out of doing stuff like that, that's free advertising as well. And I think that it is truly. Doing well while doing good. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. Do you find that you become engaged in, almost product discussions, but certainly company discussions as a function of the philanthropic or humanitarian work you do?
I think there have certainly been situations where we've met people who, through some of the charity work, who have been able to help influence other stuff that we've done. But the bigger thing is, maybe I'll even show you one of these. Trying to think, I was looking at this earlier today. The Girl Scouts one is kind of cool. Or, yeah. Oh. There we go.
Girl-serving organisation. Our mission is to build girls of courage, confidence and character to make the world a better place. And our opportunity right now, working with Salesforce, is to make the whole process of applying to be a volunteer and the volunteering itself a fun and fulfilling program.
Volunteers are essential to our organization, essential to the success of a girl, and really are what makes Girl Scouting successful today. Before Salesforce, we were facing many challenges. We knew we had a lot of girls that were interested, but we didn't have a way to capture that.
What we recognized was we had girls who couldn't find places in Girl Scouts, and that was because we didn't have enough volunteers. There were many different steps, various pieces of paper, different websites to go to. We line that all up, so it's a fairly clear, reasonable, step-by-step process that happens in days instead of weeks.
Volunteers don't have the time they used to in the past. They want to be able to volunteer at specific times, not specifically in their particular interests.
Now with Salesforce, we're able to look at our maps and our demographics by zip code and really understand where are girls interested and how can we better recruit volunteers for those girls. Dashboards have helped us understand where new girls are interested and how we can better support them.
Our goal is to improve the entire volunteer experience. Throughout the Girl Scout leadership experience, we needed both sales and support. It wasn't a either or, it needed to be both. Salesforce gave us all of that.
A year ago, only 20 to 30% of our volunteers were completing the required training, and this year we have a 100% completion rate on all of our volunteers.
We made our selection of Salesforce in March, and by April we were working on that first implementation, and we brought the software up for training the second week of July. That's the speed of light.
The Salesforce Foundation has made it possible because, as a non-profit, we have limited resources and we need to have access to the very best of technology.
It's changed the way we interact with our customers. Our staff time is spent on the volunteer rather than on the system.
This is not just putting in a system. This is fundamental change about bringing Girl Scouts to every girl who wants to do it.
What we have today with Salesforce is something that I know can continue to grow.
David Sting followed us all the way through this.
I would very much recommend working with a foundation.
So, if you're at all interested, if you go out to YouTube and search Salesforce Foundation, there's probably 100 of these videos out there. Everything from how technology is being used to do the largest breast cancer research study out of UCSF right now, which couldn't be done without some scale technology applications, to organizations like Donors Choose, which are really changing how philanthropy is done in a lot of sectors, to universities and colleges. And I mean, it's a really, really neat story, both on how a lot of organizations are doing some really great work and are really moving forward in a very modern way, and how a for-profit company can kind of help them get there. So, any other questions? Yeah.
One of our challenges on these mission trips is sustainability. Are there any hearing-based companies that use Salesforce that you know of right now that when we go back to Jordan, we can say, okay, this was their audiogram from last trip, pull it up readily, and then see where they compare from 6 months ago to today? Is there?
When you say compare, meaning a trending history of people who've
Correct.
helped you?
Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would, yeah, I mean, so you're tracking what the audio companies contribute, or is that what you're?
If they do, and correct if I'm using the wrong term, but if they do a test on hearing, and then we come back 6 months later.
Oh, yeah.
Can we capture that hearing test readily in Salesforce, and then next time
Yes.
there, look at it
Yeah.
readily, okay?
Yeah.
Because I don't know how many patients we see on a recurring basis, but there's a very good chance that we'll go back to Jordan for the third time this year, or at least March of next year.
Mhm.
And it'd be great to be able to see that, and I'm sure
Yeah.
there's more applications.
Yeah, and the you know, when you talk about the application of technology to a problem like that, so especially when you're just starting out, record, I mean, your own businesses, you see this. I mean, record keeping is a pain, right? And especially when you're doing a lot of charities and charity work, the people who are doing it sometimes change over time. Or you don't want the one person, we don't, I'll pick on Nora, we don't, Nora and Ken can't have all the boxes in the basement of every record of everything you've ever done. Moving that into a cloud-based technology so it's no longer physical storage of those records would drive a lot of good, right? And it would probably allow you to enhance, the way you do these things. So I would think absolutely. But the other thing I would tell you, because I've heard a little bit about some of that work that this group has done, which is amazing, and you should all be really, really proud of that. You should not be shy about absolutely pillaring the local businesses that you do business with, that are in your communities to help financially support what you're doing there. And I'll tell you, it's interesting. We are shameless about asking for contributions for a lot of the things that we do, and we're a pretty rich company, right? It is amazing how easy it is to get people to make donations and participate and contribute to what you're doing. So I think that whether it's us or other organizations that can help support what you're doing, I think that's a no-brainer. You can do that, and you can probably scale the work you're doing in a pretty significant way.
So, to echo what Brent's saying, is each time we go on one of these mission trips, we're learning and we're getting better at what we're doing. So the first time we went, we had no record keeping.
Yeah.
And the second time we went, we were paper pencil. Well, this third time, through this year, we actually came up with a very simple Excel file.
Sure.
But I think, like you said, it does need to be expanded upon because duplication of services, even in the charity world, is happening.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to make sure that people don't take advantage of it twice around.
Sure.
So that's, to me, a huge benefit of having some kind of program that we can keep track of.
Yeah, no, I'll make sure that in terms of what we do in this space and how we may be able to help out with some technology, we'll make sure that we get you all those details. And if I have to twist any arms, I will on getting you more than the usual. So we're happy to do that. Nora.
Only because you brought it up. Shameless.
Yes, you'd be shameless. Oh, God.
Come on a trip with us.
I want to come on a trip here. I just have to figure out when.
All right.
No, I'll sometime in the next 12 months, I will do one with you. I can get water. I can get pizza if that's possible where you're going. I can carry bags, so. And sometimes I can even sail a boat. So we'll see if
We need
I'd
an
love
internet
to.
connection in Chibambo, Africa.
Yeah, well, that is one of the challenges, is that a lot of the technology things do require an internet connection. And some parts of the emerging world are a little tougher. Although it's interesting, some parts of the emerging world actually have way better infrastructure than we do when it comes to internet connectivity, which is something that's kind of interesting to see. But we can probably help with those kinds of things too. Any other questions? So I didn't start this. The cool, fun fact of this whole thing. So the reason I know these two is I've known Ken since, oh my God, we were like 12, something like that, 12 or 13.
This is the how. How did we come across Greg?
How do we come across Greg? So in 1985 or 6, probably 86, Ken and I were living across the street from each other in Toledo, Ohio, and it was really hot, so it was summertime. And we had one friend who had a pool. God love Joe Shammy and his parents. And I walk outside, and I lived on a corner, and you could kind of see the pool. And Joe had these two what appeared to be very cute blondes, swimming in his pool on the hottest day of the year. And so, doing what anyone would do, I called Ken up and said, "You got to come over here because there's no way I'm seeing this right." And then what transpired after that is what I like. So the guy who had the pool is Joe Shammy. That was the day that Ken ruined Nora's chance of being Nora Shammy. And the rest is history. But I was there at not only the day, the moment that they met, and I got to see this all unfold. And I still can't believe you married him. But to literally, so I've known Nora since she was like 5, practically. She looks the same. And like everybody says that, you should put bigger hair, maybe bigger hair. Back then. But these are two of my favorite people in the world, and it's great to see all their success and the success beyond just the commercial stuff. So that's why it's fun to do this. So, any other questions?
Yeah, he's my buddy, so I get just a couple moments if I may. I told Ron that there's no chance of me getting out of this unscathed before
I feel like I was very well behaved.
It is true, though. I have documentation that he's older than 26 because we both graduated in 1989, class of 1989, Toledo Central Catholic High School. But I just want to share a couple things that I heard you say, Greg.
Yep.
I always get a kick out of seeing just huge mega companies. You said they started with 6 employees. Well, here's Entheos, and we've got 3 employees. And so when you're a startup like we are, what do? You beg and borrow every resource and dime you can. So when we found out we were having a meeting in Chicago, I was like, I got a good high school buddy here in Chicago. And so we had a beverage. We hadn't caught up in a long time. About 6 months ago, we had a beverage. And Brady, you asked him about what kind of conversations do you have with your give back. And so we were catching up, and he and Nora, started to tell him about what we're doing and what he's doing. And I think the whole hour we were together was all just, and you could just tell Greg was super jazzed up about that component of Salesforce.com. And so it was at that moment, he didn't know it, but I knew that Nora just bought him a job. I was like, buddy, you are in for it. So I knew that was the case. And then last night, Greg was generous enough to take us out on his boat, some of the board members. And I think Greg is just kind of working it through in his mind in terms of, okay, how do I draw the comparison between what we're doing with Salesforce and here's a bunch of private practice audiologists. And I can't tell you how on point your presentation was today. Just validating some of the cultural stuff. I know with our business doing a not-for-profit and the cooperative as well, just what it means to our business. And it's just great to see on a much larger scale that it works. That it just, besides some of maybe the goodwill and exposure that you might get from it, just like you said, the recruiting and just the employees that I know we have, that if we didn't bring meaning to our jobs every day, some of our employees wouldn't be there. They're too high level just to answer a phone or just to fit a hearing aid or what have you. It's only because we do that kind of work that we've got the culture and some of the employees we have. So, and just finally, thank you a million. I mean, you meet Greg for 5 minutes and it's very obvious he's a successful guy. He was out on a boat last night with us on Lake Michigan at 11 o'clock at night, had his first meeting this morning at 7 a.m., and still makes time to drive all the way across Chicago and have a meeting with us today. So
this was way more fun than what I gave up to do. Trust me.
So if you would, just from a personal standpoint, just give Greg an extra.
Thank you.